This video will continue our study of the scenes and artifacts with pertinence to 1st and 2nd Kings. We'll concentrate especially on the city of Jerusalem, looking at various aspects of the temple, including its western wall and the trumpeter's corner located within the temple. Then we'll turn our attention to Hezekiah's broad wall and Hezekiah's tunnel. Let's take advantage of Landsat photography with the help of ROAR Productions in order to orient ourselves to the location of Jerusalem and more particularly the Temple Mount. Here we have the Dead Sea on the lower right, Sea of Galilee at the top, connected by the Jordan River with the Mediterranean off to the west. The gray zone that you see around the red letter I is metropolitan Jerusalem. Let's zoom in now on the Temple Mount proper. You'll see that closing in. What you want to watch for here is this tan area with a little black dot in it. That's the Muslim structures there on the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock. Let's back up just a bit to pick up one other feature. Along here on the right of the Dome of the Rock is the Kidron Valley. You can see that a little more clearly now. A little difficult to sense the topography, but this falls away. The reason there are no structures on this region where the cursor is right now is because of the steepness of it. This falls away to the Kidron Valley. And now zooming in on the Temple Mount area in particular. Shots that follow will picture this walkway, this Herodian pavement. They will also picture this southwest corner of the Temple Mount area where the trumpeter's corner was located. So one of the photos that you see soon, the camera will be located right here and looking at walkway here. Another picture, the camera will be located here looking directly at this wall. Another feature we want to be aware of, this is the western wall, or known as the Kotel. In times past, it went by the designation the Wailing Wall. Although you cannot see it right from this vantage, this rises high, it looms high, and these figures here are pious Jews or tourists who are coming to visit. You'll see that in a photo in just a moment as well. This photo will help us orient to the Kotel, the western wall. A moment ago you saw a section of the wall from the aerial view portrayed. You were examining this line right here from overhead. Now we're about standing at the level of the surface of the wall, looking at it from a bit of distance. And notice then that it is a retaining wall, and there's a plaza at that level towards the top of the wall. Inside, what was formerly the Temple Mount area is now under Islamic control, and we're looking at the Dome of the Rock, a major sacred site for Islamic peoples. The next photograph will zero in on this stone in particular, so we'll be down at the pavement level looking at this stone, and you'll see the conjunction of the wall on the left and the wall on the right. The western wall, known formally as the Wailing Wall, is the focal point of devotion for Jewish worshippers. This is the retaining wall that holds in the soil that Herod had brought in order to fill in and level out the Temple Mount Plaza. The temple itself would have been far up at the top of where this wall is holding in the soil. We're interested in this even though it is centuries later than the Temple of Solomon. We're interested because it gives us an idea of the capacity of ancient engineers to quarry out, transport, and put in place enormous blocks of stone. And that's the reason for boxing out the one ashlar, as we call them, a large chiseled stone, an ashlar, that is part of the retaining wall. trace the cyan line in this picture again, and you will see yet another ashlar. It runs basically most of the way from the corner on your left to the gentleman with the red hat there in the center. It looks as though if we look very, very closely, perhaps the last 3 or 4 feet of that run are maybe a different stone. But even with that, this is an enormous, enormous ashlar. Again, this is from Herod's engineering project, but it gives us an idea of the capacity of ancient engineers to quarry, transport, and put in place staggeringly large stones. This model of the temple will help us orient so that future pictures will have a sense of where they belong. We're looking at the southwest corner of Herod's temple, the temple that was destroyed in 70 AD. The original temple was built in the same vicinity, although not on the same dimensions exactly. By studying the destruction that the Romans effected on Herod's temple in 70 AD, it will help us move into the sense of Jerusalem's destruction in 586 BC. Draw your attention, first of all, to the pavement. And here we're interested in the sidewalk that runs from left to right at the base of the retaining wall for the temple. Pictures that you'll see in a moment will photograph current conditions of that pavement. We also want to orient ourselves to where the trumpeter's corner was located, the southwest corner there up at the top, the upper level of Herod's temple. Here's a scene of that pavement. Notice its undulating character. Certainly it's deteriorated, but we're interested in the fact that, as initially, it's fully reasonable to assume that this was level and flat. Look at the degree of engineering skill of which they're capable for creating a long, millennia-enduring straight wall. Surely the pavement would have been flat initially too, and yet look how undulating it is. This photo is taken from that corner, the southwest corner, down at the pavement level, and then in the previous picture we would have been looking to the left. Here's that same southwest corner, and look at the destruction that we're seeing. How uneven is the pavement. This is a replica imitating an actual stone that was found there at the pavement level. What's intriguing about it is the inscription. It indicates that this stone originally was up at the top of the trumpeter's corner, for this indicates that process of a trumpeter who from that vantage point would in essence tell time for the community in the listening audience, people within earshot of the temple. Why that would be important, particularly at the Sabbath, people needed to know when it was sundown and when it was time to begin the Sabbath's rest. So this was known as the trumpeter's corner. That corner would have then been at the top of the retaining wall and then on top of temple buildings that were built above there, far at that top pinnacle that you see at the upper area of the photo. That's where the stone was originally, and from that height it was pushed over by the 10th Legion, the Roman armies, when in 70 AD they destroyed the temple. So that means that the undulation of the sidewalk that we see in the previous pictures, this was caused by the impact of heavy objects being pushed off from the top of the wall. What we're trying to do is appreciate the level of devastation caused by marauding groups as they come in and desecrate the temple and show that they are overrunning the civilization, the culture, and the religion that was there in Israel at that time. Next, we'd like to turn our attention to Hezekiah's broad wall. Hezekiah's broad wall. We're going to be looking at an archaeological feature that doesn't date to the time of Jesus, such as Herod's Temple would have, but actually dates to a construction project initiated by Hezekiah. Let's use Roar Productions Landsat photography to locate Hezekiah's wall. Here you see the Temple Mount with the large retaining wall around it. Again, the Wailing Wall here, southwest corner with the Trumpeter's corner located here. Now draw your attention to this shadowed area where the cursor is circling. This is where Hezekiah's wall has been located. We'll zoom in on that just a bit and you'll be able to see the shape of it, and that will correspond to a photo that you'll see in just a moment. It's this angled rectangle that we're looking at. This is lower than the buildings around. It's lower than the street level because of the excavation. In a moment, you'll see a photograph. The camera was situated right about in here, looking across this direction. And you'll be able to see both the lower zone where the rough wall material is evident, has been uncovered, and you'll be able to see the walkway at the street level up here. Again, Hezekiah's wall. What we want then from this photo to imagine, extrapolate then, so that the wall would have originally gone somewhere off in here and then extended somewhere off in here. But over time and the accumulation of living debris, it was covered up so that now we only have a brief portion exposed, and we have to extrapolate where we suppose the rest of it may have been. As we look at this map, what we want to be aware of is the wall layout for Jerusalem. Originally, the walls around Jerusalem would have followed where the cursor is making its path right now. Above the Kidron Valley, there on the east side, running south to north, and then encircling the Temple Mount and making its way down the west side along the zone known as the City of David. When Hezekiah came to the throne, this would have been the extent of the outer fortifications protecting the residents of Jerusalem. However, as his reign progressed, the amount of population that was residing outside, and especially to the west, you see this designation, the Western Hill, the amount of population residing in this area made it clear that if the Assyrians decided to create some problems, a large amount of the population would be at risk. Consequently, hastily, Hezekiah set out a decree that there should be the construction of a secondary wall, and this wall then would stretch along the dotted line where the cursor is tracing now. The effect of that then was to create a little more security for the population that had sprung up outside the city walls of the City of David and Temple Mount. During a construction project in around 1970 in Jerusalem, as they began to do some excavation, they came across what you see here in the picture. They came across these courses of stone with considerable width. Let me back up a moment and let you orient to the picture. The street level of modern Jerusalem is here basically at the top edge of the wall that you see, basically under where the label is, the bottom of the slide label. You can read about this in Isaiah 22, verses 10 to 11. At that point, Isaiah is actually indicting Hezekiah, saying, yes, you built this hastily constructed wall that was made of materials of houses in the area that were torn down. That's an interesting point. To go on with Isaiah, he's indicting Hezekiah because he didn't sufficiently put his confidence in God, but rather put his confidence in man-made protection. Back to that idea about this wall being constructed out of materials harvested from houses in the vicinity that had been dismantled in order to provide building materials. Compare for a moment the fieldstone look of the rocks that make up the outer edge and then the fill rocks. Notice how haphazard this is. Compare that to the careful construction of Herod's retaining wall. Yes, admittedly, 5.5 centuries later, but nevertheless, we know they had the capacity for doing some substantial, carefully thought out and engineered building. In contrast to that, clearly this is a hastily constructed wall. If you wish to compare what did a wall or foundations look like back in the era of Hezekiah or even earlier, if they were not made in a hasty fashion, think back to the Megiddo casemate gates. Here again are the casemate gates of Megiddo. These are not hastily constructed. You can see that the stones are shaped and dressed. We're referring not to the pavement stones, but to the gates themselves. Consider also the foundations that we see at Megiddo. Notice how carefully dressed are these stones. These are not haphazard field stones. And that construction at Megiddo, again, would have predated the construction of this wall. So it's not a matter of them not knowing how to build a carefully conceived wall. It's that this was done in hurried fashion. We'll back up to the previous slide just to notice and locate ourselves in this map. Now we see the importance of this slightly curved reddish-brown line that mirrors the curve of the wall that you saw in the photo. This is the only part of Hezekiah's wall that they have actually uncovered. The rest of the reddish-brown lines that form the outline of the western section, this is projection. Archaeologists and historians projection. They expect that the wall at one time encompassed this area. But the only part they've actually found is the portion that's been displayed in the photo. While we're at it, you may be wondering, well, what does the solid black line then signify? This is known as the Turkish Wall or the Crusaders' Wall. This dates more towards medieval times, and it is the wall that you see in photos, or if you go to Jerusalem, if you ever go into the old city of Jerusalem, you will pass through gates that are gates within this medieval era wall. That's not a wall dating to biblical times, it's much later. Next, we'd like to explore Hezekiah's tunnel. Once again, an actual element that puts us in touch with the activities of Hezekiah's monarchy. When you go to Jerusalem, I highly encourage you to take this walk. It's not strenuous at all. You will encounter this sign that gives you the direction to Hezekiah's tunnel. Notice that Gihon Spring Square is not too far away. That is the source of the water which flows through Hezekiah's tunnel even today. Looking at that same map that was posted outside the Hezekiah's wall, we can now turn our attention to the top of the picture, and this blue line, serpentine fashion, traces the pathway of the Hezekiah's tunnel. This was designed in order to bring water from Gihon Spring inside the city wall so that in the case of siege they would have a reliable source of water. This was done roughly in 702. The reason we date it to that approximate time is that when Sennacherib came in 701, then it's our understanding that this water supply would have been in place by that time. So we pick a date prior to 701. You can read about it in 2 Kings 20:20. Here's a map from biblicalarchaeology.org that gives us that same serpentine path, now with north oriented to the top of the screen. You could see the Kidron Valley falling away to the right. The length was 535 meters, and it was produced by excavation teams, one team operating from the north, one team operating from the south. The reason it's serpentine is they had to make some adjustments as they tried to locate each other in this 535-meter tunnel. At the point where the two sets of workers met each other underground, this inscription was put in place to celebrate that achievement. It talks of them being able to hear each other as the separating partition grew thinner and thinner. the sounds of the workmen chiseling away at the stone. This particular inscription is now housed in the Istanbul Museum. When you go to take this tour, as you pass through the entryway, the ticket gate, they will have this poster displayed, and it depicts in a slightly more artistic fashion that same topographical layout. So we have the Gihon Spring here, and then you see the light blue and dotted line marking the pathway of the water leading to the Pool of Siloam. This pathway appears to be above the ground, but in reality it's underground. This gives you an idea of what the chiselers, the tunnelers, were up against. This is solid stone that they had to make their way through. Here we're looking down the stairway as tourists make their way to the water level. And here you can see an actual portion of the subterranean passageway with the water there at the base of the picture. Notice how clear it is. This was a startling realization. In case the question is in your mind, does it still flow with water? The answer is absolutely yes, and it is crystal clear, cool water. Friends of mine are in the photo, and you can get an idea now the dimension of the tunnel. It's never any narrower than the shoulder width of an average sized person. The figure in front is actually standing with his feet on the bottom of the creek, as it were, this waterway. The fella in back is bracing himself. He's actually standing on part of the tunnel wall, so giving an artificial sense of height. Here's a close-up of the tunnel wall. A couple of things to notice here. You'll notice light zones, which indicate that originally it was entirely covered with plaster in order to render this tunnel less likely to let water seep away. They were protecting their resource by lining it with plaster. This was commonly done with large cisterns, and when we say large, we're talking large enough to fit several rooms in. Masada is one place where you can find enormous cisterns. So water catchment was a finely developed hydraulic engineering feat in the ancient world. Plastering of walls was a standard step in improving the quality of your water catchment system. The other feature to notice is the lines. These would be water stain lines. Once again, these are lines in the plaster, not the underlying rock. So what we're seeing is various water levels. I've talked to some people that when they took the walk through Hezekiah's tunnel, the water was up to their chest, simply because the season when they took the tour, the amount of rainfall in the area, the water table had risen. So there was that much water. You can see it was about mid-thigh on the day that my friends and I walked through Hezekiah's tunnel. You can see the water there in the lower right-hand corner. And here again, this is the exit point coming into the Pool of Siloam. Notice again the clarity. You can even see the tennis shoes that my friend is wearing. And that's water at this point that's probably about 3 feet deep. A wonderful, wonderful source for drinking water in the ancient world. We're looking here at the Pool of Siloam, the exit area. When you finish walking through, and do be sure and have water shoes and bring a flashlight because there's not interior lighting. When you're finished, then you will come and walk up these steps that you see on the right, and that will lead you up to the street level from which this photo was taken. This concludes the video survey of various scenes and artifacts pertinent to 1st and 2nd Kings. The next video will take up theological observations.